Bertha Beachy. I was born close to Kokomo, Indiana at Wapikan, and I was born July 2nd, 1931. Oh, that's a long story. I come from a very committed spiritual family. I grew up with devotions every morning and family prayers. When I was, I guess I was 9, when my family moved to Iowa because they were not happy with what was available for my older brothers and sisters. They moved and just before World War II. We moved on the 3rd and the war started on the 7th. And it was partly because of that we were exposed to more things. And I had a brother that went on civilian public service. It was called CPS to Puerto Rico. And there were many of the young men that had done this during the war. And because of this, there was a great interest on the part of one person in the things that the Amish young people were doing. And he helped to develop an Amish mission conference, the very first one that was ever held. And it was held in Kelowna, Iowa. And I attended that conference. And for the first time, I felt called to mission, but I didn't say a word to anyone about it. So that's how it began. Well, there was a long process before I went. I went to college, I graduated from college, but my mother was a bookworm and my father loved people, and they accepted that. Actually, my 2 brothers were in college when I went there, but I was the first of the daughters to attend college. I'm number 8 in the family, so actually they were attending a reunion in Pennsylvania, and they came to New York City to see me set sail for Africa, which was a great gift to me. I went in, I arrived actually September 29th, 1958, which it is 55 years ago now that I arrived in Somalia. And I was inside Somalia for 18 years. And then it was at a time that different things were happening, and we were asked to leave. And inside Somalia, I began an elementary school, a day school. I had asked for that so the girls could come, and it wouldn't be just a boarding school for boys. And then later on, I began a bookstore in the capital city in Mogadishu. And we signed an agreement that we would not do anything counter-Islamic in that store. So we never sold anything religious in the store. It was all other things. But it was a wonderful contact with people. Then, after that, when we were sent out, I went to Kenya for 2 years. And that was difficult because the Somalis and the Kenyans did not necessarily like each other. And it goes back to their colonial background. And so it was difficult for me. I was working with Somalis in a literacy project, but I had to do it in the context of the Kenyans. I spent 2 years at that, and that was enough for me. I didn't like the context very much anymore. Anyhow, I came back then to the States, and I spent 15 years managing Provident Bookstore in Goshen. And then I retired from the bookstore in Goshen, and I was asked to return to Somalia to manage the Eastern Mennonite Mission Board office and the MCC office, two offices in one for Somalia, which meant all Somali information went through my office, and I was the one that informed them what was happening. And I did that for 5 years. I came back in the year 2000. I only think of one time that I felt anxious. I had come back from a holiday in Kenya, and I was living in the lower part of Somalia, close to the equator, 10 miles from the equator. And I needed to get back to my place because school was beginning, and there was no way that I could go with anyone from the mission or anyone else that I knew. I ended up going with a U.S. aid driver. And along the line, we got stuck several times. And we spent one night at the halfway mark, and then started out the next morning, and we were stuck again. I ended up in the vehicle alone with people I didn't know. And that was one of the things I did. I fanned myself all night long so they would know that I was awake. And I got there safely. I ended up staying in the mayor's home one night in Juba, and then I was able to send word, and someone came to get me from there. Yes. So that's the only time I really felt anxious. There were, of course, dangerous things at times, but not that much. Made a difference if the people knew you and if they knew that you liked them. The way they would describe someone that liked them, they had an open face. And I always had an open face. I would just say my Amish background was perfect for the Somali context. Amish people love children, so did Somalis. Amish people respect age, so did Somalis. In the Amish context, you learn to know people. You don't automatically tell them everything you believe right away. And that was an important factor, that I learned to know people and could be with them. They had an oral tradition. I came from an oral tradition. And they loved camels. My family loved horses. Well, I loved working with women. And I discovered when I started, I had elementary training, but I discovered when I was working with that I really preferred working with adults. And so I was pleased when I moved to Mogadishu after the first 4 years and started the bookstore, because I also taught adults English classes. And I enjoyed working with the women, getting into their homes, having them come to my home, and we would do things together in town. So that they came to my house for a meal, just as an example, and I went through telling them exactly how we would do that, and I would be invited to their homes as well. So that was always a great pleasure for me. And then later in Nairobi, I worked a lot on peace issues with women, and that was a great pleasure. Well, it was the first time that I was responsible for a school. That was a big change. I think one of the other changes that I noticed, in our family, we always had family discussions about things. Things were not decided for one without all of us understanding it. And I discovered in the mission, the men were used to making all the decisions, and we would be informed later on. And that was difficult for me. And most of the women didn't care, but I did. I think so. The things they have been doing and have done are all connected with history, things that have happened to them. And so they have become more radical because it feels as though it's the one way of survival. They had, the second president was assassinated. They had another president that wasn't very good. And then Siad Barre was a military man, and he came in. Eventually he was out, and someone else was in. So it's complicated. But I'm always hopeful. And I pray every day for the Al-Shabaab, for Al-Qaeda, and for the president. They have a new president now. And recently, I had a friend from Eastern Mennonite University who was working with Somali women on peace issues. And she was able to go to the north to visit and work with the women. And she actually was able to come to the south as well and visit Mogadishu. And she sent me a letter saying that she actually saw where the mission used to live. And she was very hopeful. Everywhere she went, she would hear that they appreciated the schools that we had. They appreciated the medical help that we had. So who knows? But without hope, there's no future. And I hope. I may not see it in my day and age, but I believe. And I meet with people I shouldn't say all, with email, Somalis in email, that would join me in saying that. And some of them find it as difficult as the outside world does for some of the happenings inside. It's complex, not simple. The way I would always say it, I don't know enough. I need to learn more. One thing I'd like to say is, don't generalize about Muslim people. Don't generalize about Amish people. It's fine to speak about your experience, but don't assume you understand everything because you've had one experience, and maybe one that wasn't pleasant. There is always much more to learn. And I think that's true in relating to any group of people. This represents the three monotheistic religions. The outside is Islam. The next one is Judaism, and the center is Christianity. It was actually something that was made close to Bethlehem, and I was given a copy, and I've gotten more since.